Estevao Willian, Chelsea, and a disagreement that could shape everything. Let me ask you something straight away. Imagine you are an 18-year-old kid. You just moved to one of the biggest clubs in the world. You are playing in the Premier League for the first time in your life. You score 8 goals in your debut season. You earn your first senior goal for your country. The World Cup is coming up, and everyone in Brazil is talking about you as one of the most exciting young players heading into the tournament. Then, in one moment, everything stops. A hamstring tear. A serious one. And now you are sitting in Brazil, away from your club, away from the World Cup squad. And the people around you are in a disagreement with Chelsea over how to fix it. That is where Estevao Willian finds himself right now. And if you are a Chelsea fan, this story matters a lot more than it might seem on the surface. So let us get into it, all of it. The injury, the disagreement, the World Cup heartbreak, and what happens next. Who is Estevao Willian, and why does he matter so much to Chelsea? Before we talk about the current situation, it is worth reminding ourselves just how big a deal Estevao already is at Chelsea. When Chelsea signed him, there was a lot of excitement. But excitement around young signings is nothing new for this club. What was different with Estevao is that he actually delivered right away. He did not take long to settle. He did not go on loan. He did not struggle with the pace and physical demands of the Premier League the way many young players do when they arrive from South America. He just got stuck in and started performing. 8 goals in his debut season is not a small number. That is a real contribution from a teenager who had never played English football before. He became a regular. He became important. He became someone fans got excited to watch every week. And on the international stage, things were moving just as fast. He scored his first senior goal for Brazil during the qualification rounds leading up to the 2026 World Cup. That is a massive moment for any player. For someone his age, it was remarkable. The talk around him in Brazil was huge. People were saying he could be the X factor for Brazil at the tournament. Then the injury happened, and now everything is on pause. What actually happened with the injury? Estevao picked up a severe hamstring tear. That is not a minor problem. Hamstring injuries at this level of severity are serious business. They take a long time to heal. They require careful management. And if they are not handled correctly, they can come back to hurt a player again and again. The key word here is severe. This was not a small strain that would have him back in 2 or 3 weeks. This was the kind of injury that ended his season completely. Chelsea confirmed he would not play again this campaign. The focus now is entirely on getting him fit for the start of the 2026 to 2027 season. But here is where things get complicated, because Chelsea and the players' camp do not fully agree on how to handle the recovery. And that disagreement is sitting right at the heart of this whole situation. The big disagreement: surgery or no surgery. This is the part that Chelsea fans need to pay close attention to. According to reports from Brazil, Chelsea want Estevao to have surgery on the injury. They believe that is the right path. Surgery would be a more definitive fix. It would give the medical team a clearer timeline for recovery. It would reduce uncertainty about when he can return to full training and competitive football. But Estevao's personal camp, meaning the people around him, such as his advisors and representatives, are pushing back on that. They want to take a conservative approach. That means no surgery. Instead, they want to manage the injury through rest, rehabilitation, physical therapy, and careful monitoring of how the tissue heals naturally. So you have 2 very different paths being suggested here. On one side, Chelsea's medical team and the club are saying surgery gives the best chance of a full and clean recovery. On the other side, Estevao's people are saying they do not want to take the risks that come with an operation. Surgery always carries some level of risk. There is the procedure itself, the recovery from going under the knife, the chance of complications. His camp believes that if the conservative approach is managed well, it can work just as well without those risks. Here is the thing, though. Neither side is necessarily wrong. This kind of disagreement happens in football all the time. Players and clubs have different interests. A club wants certainty. A player and his team want to protect his body in a way they feel comfortable with. But who is right in this particular case? That question will only be answered over the coming weeks and months as his recovery unfolds. If Estevao heals well without surgery and is back to full fitness at the start of pre-season, his camp will feel completely vindicated. They made the call, they stuck to it, and it worked. But if the conservative approach leads to complications or a slower recovery than expected, Chelsea's concerns will turn out to have been well-founded. Right now, nobody knows which way it will go. What does this mean for the World Cup? Let us address the elephant in the room. Estevao will not be at the 2026 World Cup. He did not make Brazil's preliminary squad because of this injury. That is confirmed. That is done. For a player who was being talked about as one of Brazil's most exciting young weapons heading into the tournament, that is a devastating outcome. This World Cup is being held across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It is one of the biggest sporting events in history. Every player in the world wants to be there. And Estevao, who was on the verge of making it, who had already scored a senior goal for Brazil in qualifying, will be watching from home. Think about how that feels at his age. But here is the perspective that matters most right now. The World Cup is one tournament. Estevao has many years of football ahead of him. If he is fully fit and performing at his best, there is no reason he cannot be a central figure for Brazil for the next decade. The 2030 World Cup is not far away, and many tournaments in between. His focus now and Chelsea's focus now has to be getting him right, not just for the start of next season, but for the long term. A player of his quality and his age is a generational asset for this club. Rushing his recovery or mismanaging this injury could have consequences that go far beyond one season. If Chelsea or his camp get this wrong, they risk turning a small setback into a much bigger problem. That is why the disagreement over surgery versus conservative treatment matters so much. Both sides understand the stakes. They just see the solution differently. So what does next season look like for Estevao? Let us talk about the practical picture for Chelsea in the 2026 to 2027 season. Estevao arrived at Chelsea as a teenager with enormous promise. He delivered on that promise in year one. 8 goals, regular first-team football, international appearances. For a player his age, that is a remarkable start. But heading into next season, things are different in several ways. First, he is essentially starting from scratch with a new manager. The managerial situation at Chelsea has changed, and that means Estevao needs to re-establish himself all over again. Even after everything he showed last season, he cannot walk in and assume his place is guaranteed. He will need to prove himself under new management, and he will need to do that while coming back from a significant injury. Second, there is the question of timing. Even if his recovery goes well, will he be fully fit and sharp for the start of pre-season? Will he need time to get his match sharpness back? These are real concerns. Coming back from a severe hamstring tear and jumping straight into competitive football is not simple. Third, and this is something Joe Cole has raised publicly, there is a broader question about the squad around him. Joe Cole has spoken openly about his worry that Chelsea are too reliant on youth. His concern is that a squad full of young players does not have enough experienced voices and leaders to guide them through tough moments. When things get difficult in a season, who are the experienced winners in that dressing room that the young players can look to? Cole even mentioned names like John Stones and Jordan Henderson as the kind of experienced winners who could be brought in alongside Estevao to provide that leadership and wisdom. It is a valid point. Young players benefit enormously from having veterans around them. Players who have won trophies, who have been through difficult seasons, who know how to handle pressure. Without that, young talents can feel isolated when things get hard. Estevao coming back from injury into a squad that lacks experienced leadership is a real challenge, not impossible. but something the club needs to think carefully about. The bigger picture. Chelsea's youth model under the microscope. Let us zoom out a little here, because the Estevao situation is part of a much bigger conversation about how Chelsea are building this club. The model they have been running is built around young players, signing talented teenagers and early 20s players, developing them and building a squad for the future. The idea is sound in theory. Find the best young talent in the world, bring them to Stamford Bridge and create a dynasty. But models like this come with real challenges. Young players make mistakes. Young players have inconsistent performances. Young players can go through rough patches. And when your entire squad is full of young players, all those challenges happen at the same time, with nobody experienced enough to steady the ship. Estevao's injury and the disagreement over his treatment is one example of how complex it gets when you are managing young talent at the highest level. These are young people making huge decisions about their bodies and their careers. The people around them have enormous influence. And when the club and the players' camp see things differently, it creates friction. Does Chelsea need to reconsider parts of this model? Joe Cole seems to think so. And honestly, when you look at the situation with Estevao, it is hard to completely disagree. Having a mix of experienced players alongside the young ones is not a weakness. It is actually how most successful squads are built. You need the hunger and energy of youth, but you also need the calm and wisdom of experience. The question for Chelsea going forward is whether they are willing to add that missing ingredient. What Chelsea fans are feeling right now. If you are a Chelsea supporter reading this, your feelings about the Estevao situation are probably mixed. On one hand, you are disappointed and a little frustrated. This was supposed to be a big summer with the World Cup showcasing some of Chelsea's best players to the world. Estevao was one of the players you were most excited to watch represent the club on the biggest stage. That is not happening now. On the other hand, you are probably not panicking, because what Estevao showed in his debut season was real. The quality is there. The ability is there. One injury does not erase what he has already done or what he is capable of doing. The main worry, and it is a legitimate one, is how the recovery is handled. If Chelsea and his camp can find a way to work together properly and manage this situation well, Estevao will be back. He will be back stronger, and he will have years and years of incredible performances ahead of him at the club. But if this disagreement over treatment drags on, if there is ongoing friction between the club and the players' inner circle, if the recovery is mismanaged for any reason, then the situation becomes much harder to recover from. So what do you think Chelsea should do? Should they push harder for the surgery route, or should they trust Estevao's camp and give the conservative approach time to work? That is actually a really important question, because ultimately the club has to find a way to align with the player. You cannot force a player to have surgery. The relationship between a club and a player depends on trust. If Chelsea push too hard and create a serious rift with Estevao's team, that could cause problems that go far beyond this one injury. At the same time, Chelsea have a medical team and medical responsibilities. If they genuinely believe surgery is the best option for the player's long-term health, staying silent about that just to keep the peace is not the right answer either. The ideal outcome is that both sides keep talking, keep sharing information, and eventually find common ground. Whether that means surgery, conservative treatment, or some combination of both. What happens if the recovery goes well? Let us paint the positive picture for a moment. Imagine the conservative approach works. Estevao's hamstring heals properly over the summer. He comes back to preseason training fully fit. He gets match sharp quickly during the preseason games. He walks into the new season under the new manager, and picks up right where he left off. That is absolutely a realistic scenario. Conservative treatment for hamstring injuries works in many cases. Plenty of players have recovered from injuries of this nature without surgery and gone on to have full and successful careers. If that happens, Chelsea have a fully fit Estevao heading into 2026 to 2027, a player with a full debut season under his belt in the Premier League, a player who knows the club, knows his teammates, and knows what it takes to succeed in English football. Add that to whatever improvements Chelsea make in the transfer window and in the managerial setup, and there is real reason for optimism. Estevao himself has already said that his focus is entirely on a full recovery so that he can lead Chelsea's attack for years to come. That tells you a lot about his mentality. He is not wallowing in what has been lost with the World Cup. He is already thinking about what comes next. That kind of attitude is exactly what you want from a player. It suggests he will approach his rehabilitation with the same dedication he brought to his debut season. What happens if things go wrong? Now, let us be honest about the other side. If the conservative approach does not work as hoped, if the hamstring does not heal cleanly, if Estevao comes back too early and picks up the injury again, the situation becomes very difficult. Hamstring re-injuries are a serious problem in football. If the tissue does not heal properly the first time, the risk of it happening again goes up. And if that happens, we could be looking at a significant portion of next season also being disrupted. For a player at his age, losing large chunks of 2 consecutive seasons to the same injury would be damaging. It would delay his development, it would affect his confidence, and it would raise serious questions about how the whole situation was managed. This is not about blame, it is just reality. Managing serious injuries is complicated. There is no guaranteed perfect answer, but the stakes are high enough that everyone involved needs to be fully informed and fully aligned on the plan. If Chelsea and the players' camp are still pulling in different directions weeks from now, that is a problem, not just for the recovery itself, but for the relationship between the player and the club. The questions we are all asking. Let us bring it all together with the questions that are really at the center of this story. Will Estevao's conservative recovery approach actually work, or will Chelsea's preference for surgery turn out to be the right call? Can Chelsea and the players' camp find proper alignment before this disagreement becomes a real problem for their relationship? Is the club doing enough to build the right environment around young players like Estevao? Are they adding the experienced leadership that Joe Cole is calling for? And perhaps most importantly, is Estevao going to be the long-term star that Chelsea signed him to be? The answers to these questions will not come immediately. Recovery from a serious hamstring injury takes months. Pre-season is still weeks away. The full picture of where Chelsea are headed under new management is still forming. But these questions matter, and as Chelsea fans, they are questions worth watching closely. The outro, one setback, not the whole story. Here is what I want you to take away from all of this. Estevao Willian missing the World Cup is genuinely sad. It is a massive opportunity that he worked hard to earn and will not get to experience this time around. That is worth acknowledging. The disagreement between Chelsea and his camp over surgery is a real tension that needs to be resolved properly. It is not something to brush under the carpet. And the broader questions about Chelsea's squad model, about youth and experience, about leadership and wisdom in the dressing room, those are real conversations the club needs to have. But none of that changes what Estevao showed us in his debut season. The quality is real. The talent is exceptional. The determination seems to be there. He is 18 years old, and he has already proven he belongs at the top level of football. One injury, even a serious one, does not define a career. What matters is how it is handled and what comes after. Chelsea have a player who could be at the heart of everything they do for the next 10 years. Protecting that properly, managing this recovery well, and building the right team around him is the most important thing the club can do right now. The rest of the noise, the World Cup disappointment, the transfer window talk, the managerial changes, all of that will sort itself out. But Estevao, getting him right is the priority that matters most. So let us hope both sides find a way to work together. Let us hope the recovery goes well. And let us look forward to seeing him back on the pitch, doing what he does best. Because when he is fit and firing, watching Estevao Willian play football for Chelsea is genuinely something special. And we have not seen nearly enough of it yet.